at Dar's Garage. In this video, I'll be working on the XRAY GTXE 23 edition, and I'll be assembling bag 7. So let's get started. So bag 7 is the steering. So we don't need the chassis for now since we'll be assembling the servo saver. So put this aside. So we're going to need this piece here that the servo saver is going to install on, and it looks like the collar was already installed on there. So we're going to need that. We're going to need the spring, and we're going to need these two pieces and the O-ring that was in the hardware bag. Okay, so we can take these off the parts tray. So now we can assemble this together. So we're going to go ahead and install the O-ring on into this collar, this threaded collar, and basically just install the O-ring from the top, and it will go ahead and sit in to a groove, just like that. Okay. Now we're going to install these pieces onto the shaft here. So there's two pieces here. One is going to be larger and one is smaller. So this smaller one will go down on here first, and then the larger one will install on top of that. And then we're going to install the spring. Now the spring has a large side and a narrow side. So take note of that, because the large side is going to be facing up and the narrow side will be facing down. So you can see here the collar won't fit inside the narrow side. It'll only fit inside the wider side. So take note of that. So narrow side down. And now we can go ahead and install the collar, and we're just going to have to push down pretty hard and get the spring compressed, and we can start threading on this collar. So it wasn't too hard, just had to firmly press it together and it started. Now the initial setting is to have from the top of this shaft to the top of the collar 3 to 4 millimeters, and I'm going to go ahead and do 4 millimeters because probably want to have a stiffer servo saver to get better handling. We're close to 4 millimeters, so you can go ahead and this is ready. So it's actually going to install with the collar facing down. We have these two pieces. Let's get this piece right here. Note the orientation of this. The little cutout is going to be facing the front. So we got the bell cranks ready. We've got this. We're going to need 2 and 3x8 screws, and we're going to need these little bushings that are threaded. And finally, we're going to need some Loctite. Okay, So the bushings, you're going to need a 3mm Allen. So how this is all going to install, we'll put a little bit of thread locker. So we're going to have this piece here. This is the front. We'll put the screws in. And then these little bushings go in the bell cranks, like so from the bottom. So we can go ahead and start that by hand. Okay. And go ahead and do this side as well. Okay, so we can use a 2mm Allen to tighten this one side, and then hold back up 3mm Allen on the bushing side. And just snug it up. Everything moves nice and free. Everything moves nice and free, just like we want. So now we can go ahead and get the chassis and install this assembly onto the chassis. So the bell crank assembly is going to install here and here. You've got holes and you have a little milled slot. So you're gonna need 2 of these posts, and you can see on the bottom of these posts you have these milled bosses here, and those milled bosses are going to go into the channels that are milled out onto the chassis. So take note of that so that you get the orientation right. So we need 2 of these. You're going to need 4 6x10x3 bearings, which are these, the last 4 small bearings that you have. And you're going to need 2 M4x10 flathead screws. Okay, so let's go ahead and assemble the bell cranks with the bearings. Like so. And then we can go ahead and insert the posts. And I can put some thread locker on the M4x10 screws. So take note of the orientation of the flats and the bosses that are on these posts. So basically what I did was I lined it up, and then I just used my finger to rotate the post until I felt it slide in to that channel. And then once I knew it was in the channel, I went ahead and installed the screw from the bottom. You can hold the post in place, flip the chassis over, and go ahead and tighten down the screws. I'm just going to snug it up, double check to make sure everything is sitting perfectly like it should, and then go back and tighten it down. Everything moves nice and smooth. Now we can move on to installing the chassis brace components. So you're going to need the chassis brace, this carbon fiber piece. You'll need the 6x13x1 shims, 2 of those. You'll need 2 M3x12 flathead screws. You'll need 4 M3x8 flathead screws. And you'll need 1 M3x12 button head screw. And along with that, we're going to need 3 M3 lock nuts. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and install, well, before we do that, we're going to sand this down. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go ahead and install the lock nuts. So the one up front is going to be installed upside down. I'm going to use the shock pliers to install the lock nuts. Then on the bottom, the 2 lock nuts will install facing the right way. So now this is ready. So the 6x13x1 shims are going to install on the bell crank posts, like so. Then this carbon fiber piece is going to install on top, and take note of the countersunk holes on the carbon fiber piece. You've got 2 here, and then you've got 4 on this side. So we want this side facing up, since we'll be installing the 4 M3x8 flathead screws in these holes. So that goes on right here. The 4 holes we're lining up for the M3x8 flathead screws are going to be on these posts and then on the transmission. So next what we can do is put some Loctite on these 4 M3x8 flathead screws. And we can go ahead and install them. Go ahead and tighten in a crisscross pattern. Now we can go ahead and install the chassis brace. The chassis brace is going to install in this hole here, and then these 2 holes in the chassis here. So we're going to use the M3x12 button head screw on top. I'm going to leave that loose for now. And then we're going to install the 2 M3x12 screws from the bottom. And they're going to install on these 2 holes here and here. So make sure you don't tighten down the screw on the top first, because there was the holes didn't quite line up perfectly. So now everything's lining up, everything's started, so you can go ahead and tighten everything down. And everything still moves nice and smooth. Okay. Now we can set the chassis aside for now and prepare the turnbuckles for the steering. So we're going to need the 2 threaded rods for the turnbuckles. We're going to need the rod ends. We're also going to need the balls, and take note of the balls because there are 2 dark ones that are kind of black in color, and then the 2 silver ones. Let's get these off, these trees. So if you've been following along with this build or you've been following along with my builds with X-Ray, you'll know that X-Ray does things differently when it comes to left-hand threads and right-hand threads. So on these turnbuckles, the right-hand threads are on this side and the left-hand threads are on this side. So they want you to install on the car with the adjustment piece on the outside of the car. So that'll put the right hand thread on the left side of the car on one of the sides. So I'm not going to do that. I'm going to follow the industry standard, which is to have the left hand thread on the left side of the car. That's how all my cars are set up. So I'm going to do that. So if you pay close attention, if you want to do that and follow along, so that way you don't get mixed up. So knowing that this is the right hand thread, we'll do the right hand side turnbuckle first. So that being said, we're going to put a little bit of oil on the threads. And this is for the right hand side of the car. So we'll put this rod end on. Left hand thread. So for the right hand side of the car, the turnbuckle on the inside is going to have the black colored ball in it. And with that ball installed, we can do the other side. The other side is going to use a normal ball, and the flange will be facing downward. So take note of that. And on the inside, the thread will be facing upward. So just take note of that. So that way when you kind of set your turnbuckle up, you'll have it correctly. So thread on the inside is going to be facing up, and the flange will be facing down on the outside of the car. So the length from shoulder to shoulder is supposed to be 29 millimeters. Okay, so we're at 31. That's close enough for now. Once I install this onto the car, I'll adjust it since it'll be easier. So you can go ahead and do the left side. So on the left side, we're gonna have the right hand thread. So this is my right side. We're gonna have the right hand thread facing the inside of the car and the left hand facing outside of the car. So for y'all watching, this will be on the left side of the car, left hand thread, right side of the car, right hand thread. That being said, it'll be installing like so. So now I can go ahead and install the ball studs. And remember, you're gonna install this ball stud, the inner one with the thread facing up. And on the outer ball stud, the flange will be facing down. So now I'm just going to tighten it until I don't see any more threads, and that'll be a good indication that we're close to the setting that we need. So now we're ready to install these onto the chassis. All right, so we have right side of the car, left side of the car. We have our two turnbuckles. So we'll have the right turnbuckle with the right hand thread on the outside. And then we're going to have our left turnbuckle with the right hand thread towards the inside of the car. Okay. So now we're going to need two M3x18 flathead screws. We're going to need two M3x12 button head screws. We'll need two M3 lock nuts and two M3x6x3 shims. So the initial setting is to install the screws. Let's see if I can get this. So there's 3 holes here. So we're going to install it in the centermost hole. And how this is going to install is we're going to use the M3x12 screw. And what I'm going to do is, since it is going into metal and is not a nylock or any way to lock that in, I'm going to put a little dab of Loctite on there. So we're going to go through the center hole here on that bell crank. We're going to install the 3x6x3 shim, and then it's going to install in the turnbuckle itself. So this ball is threaded. That thread is started. So the turnbuckle on the outside is going to install on the top of the carbon fiber piece. We're going to install the M3x18 flathead screw. Remember, the flange is going to be facing down. And then we're going to install the M3 lock nut on the bottom. On the inside of the turnbuckle, you're going to need a 2.5mm Allen to hold back up on the ball. And then you can tighten with a 2mm Allen on top. And now I can do the other side. And everything moves nice and smooth. Pretty much under its own weight. So that's exactly what we want. Nothing's binding up. Now, if you haven't already checked your turnbuckle lengths, you could do so now. And since I know mine are not to the initial setting, I'm going to go ahead and adjust mine. Remember, the initial setting is 29mm. And we're set. So everything moves nice and free, just like we want it. Turnbuckles are adjusted. Everything went together smoothly, no issues. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you did. Please stay tuned for the next video where I will work on bag 8, the center solid shaft and motor. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one.